Hello everyone. Now I'm going to go over some things this time that are going to be they're going to clear up some questions in people's minds. And I will call this passing under the rod. Now there's several things I want to comment on before I get to that point. The first one would be what is called the replacement theology. What this doctrine says, I guess it's a opinion. I don't know that it's a scriptural doctrine, but it's an opinion. Some people will think it's a doctrine. It says that Israel, the nation Israel, is in reality what God is talking about in the Bible. The physical nation Israel. Now, Paul says in Romans that all Israel is not Israel. They call this replacement theology, meaning that they are replacing physical Israel with spiritual Israel or Christians in the New Testament. And this is kind of this is an unscriptural thought, and I'll explain why. God does not change. God does not change. Sometimes when truth, spiritual truth, is received or revealed within a person's mind or heart, it seems as though at that point, to that person, it seems as though they already understand everything. When God gives you any bit of a revelation, it is often so overwhelming that you think you so understand everything now. I understand everything because I received this little bit of knowledge from God, and that's understandable. We should feel a sense of awe when we receive knowledge from God, but we have to understand that that's just a small portion of God's understanding, even if we consider it to be a life-changing revelation as to Jesus' character or how he does things, how the Father operates. And that's what has happened in this so-called replacement theology. They think that Israel, physical Israel, was replaced with spiritual Israel or Christianity, when in fact God does not change. This reality that Paul found in and he knew the Old Testament better than we do, the reality that he discovered, that he was made aware of, that all Israel is not Israel. That was the way it was in the beginning. God has not changed his opinion. Abraham's seed, and we can see that if we understand Scripture, Abraham's seed was not one of flesh. It was one of spirit. It was not by, I forget the exact reference to it, but it was from the child or the line of the child of promise. Now, that would mean that all spiritual Jews are the way it was from the beginning. He did not switch to physical Israel as a representation of the people that he made promises to, and then switch back to making the promises to the spiritual people. The promises have always been to the spiritual people, not to the physical. And that is an understanding. That will give you an understanding. If you concentrate on that, it will show you that the replacement theology is just a guise by people who want to feel important to God, meaning Israel wants to feel important. They have convinced people who probably don't study the Bible a lot that they are the chosen people, when in fact the chosen people are the children of promise, not necessarily the natural children. And that truth has always applied. Paul just simply revealed it to the people in Rome, but it has always been there. It's always been the case. It was never the natural children that God made the promises to. It was always the children of promise, even before Paul revealed this in Romans. So the replacement theology is a incorrect term. They weren't replaced. They were always the spiritual children, the children of promise. So now I'm going to move on from that a little bit. I want to give you one more interesting thing that God showed me here. In reference to Job, in the Job presentation, as I have it written here, Job's problem was he considered himself righteous in Job 32:1. Now in Job 42:3, it goes, God is answering in these verses, and he's saying to Job what is going on. He says to him, "Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge?" And of course, again in Job 42:3, Job says, "I have uttered that which I did not understand." So Job was hiding the counsel of God, and he didn't understand it. That's what God himself spoke to Job in, well, there are two places actually. Job 42:3, Job 35:16, and Job 34:35. When God says this, he is telling Job what the problem he had with him was. And he was hiding God's counsel. Now the word hiding is a Strong's Concordance number 2821. It's a primitive root. It means to be dark or to darken something. So Job spoke without understanding. He had a zeal for God, but it wasn't according to understanding. He wanted God, but because of his misunderstanding, and he wanted to explain these things. He wanted to be able to explain these things. So Job 35:16 says he multiplied words without knowledge. In other words, he just talked and talked and talked until the original question was clouded or darkened. This is a natural inclination of people. When they don't understand something, instead of saying, "I don't understand," they will simply talk and talk and talk until the original message is clouded, and you still have respect for them as the teacher, without the teacher having had to say, "I don't understand." So you see, it's all a prideful thing. When a person does not want to admit they don't understand, they simply conceal the matter, or they hide the counsel of God without knowledge, as Job 42:3 says. So, let's see, I'll go on here. And this is the main thing I want to talk about this time. And I want to concentrate on the verse in the New Testament. It's 1 Peter 2:12. Having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may be by your good works, that they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify God in the day of visitation. That would be their visitation. Now, Romans 3:4 again, let God be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that thou might be justified in thy sayings. That has a little bit of application to the preceding comments about Job. That thou might be justified in thy sayings, and might overcome when thou art judged. Now, one of the primary verses that I use is 1 Corinthians 11:32, which says that Christians are judged so that they are not condemned with the world. Now this speaks of judgment as being used as a tool to help a person. And that concept is more clearly understood by reading Ezekiel 20:37, which says, I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. Now, if you couple that with the understanding from 1 Corinthians 11:32, God is causing us to pass under the rod and bringing us into the bond of the covenant. Now, In order to understand what the rod is, let me go to Jeremiah 33:13. And this says, "In the cities of the mountains, in the cities of the vale, and in the cities of the south, and in the land of Benjamin, and in the places about Jerusalem, and in the cities of Judah, shall the flocks pass again under the hands of him that judgeth." It says telleth in the King James Version, I believe it is, but telleth translation simply means judges. So in other words, these sheep are going to go under the hands of him that judges. That's what passing under the rod is. We are simply passing under the hand of God so that he can judge our behavior and bring us into the bond of the covenant. We all start out as sinners. We know that. And the judgment of God is meant to bring us into the bond of the covenant. As I mentioned in another presentation, we are judged and we perish, many of us, many who have taken the communion, many who drink the blood and eat the flesh, do it in an unwise manner, they perish. People have perished amidst judgment. If they confess the name of Christ in an unworthy manner, they have perished under this judgment. They have perished amid judgment or during judgment. And not many of us are going to be conformed to the image of Christ without going through judgment. All of us aren't. God scourges everyone he accepts as a son. Many people say that I'm just stringing verses together, but as you'll see, they're all linked together. And in Jeremiah 33:13, this is judgment. That's why I pointed out that the word telleth means judge. All the flock shall pass again under the hands of him that judges. That's passing under the rod. And it is so that God can bring us into the covenant, or the bond of the covenant. It's not to hurt us or deceive us. Now, it may be interpreted that way, because, as we know, the devil carries out the judgment of God. To a limited degree, God limits it. That's why Jesus is called the lion, or the devourer of the tribe of Judah. He doesn't discipline unbelievers this way, but the tribe of Judah he does. He disciplines them, and he controls the discipline. He doesn't want it to take their life, as in Job. He wants it to simply conform them to the image of Christ, to point out a problem they have, and then to help them get to a place where they can overcome that problem. And I think those are all of the things I wanted to say this time. Passing under the rod and judgment are not a negative thing, although we see it all around us every day. Now, these things happen at a period of time, a specific period of time, referred to as the day of judgment, the day of the Lord, the day of visitation, etc. This is just simply to help us. Now, I guess I'll end this with, let me read two verses. Psalm 125. I think this is Isaiah 11:4, I believe. Let me go there and find out. I think this is Isaiah 11:4. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. Now that's passing under the rod. And with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. That's the spiritual armor. But verse 4 speaks of passing under the rod of discipline. And it identifies that as the rod of his mouth. In other words, it's his word. We're going to be judged by the word on the day of visitation, on the day when God decides to do these things. No one knows when the day of the Lord will occur, but it is a point when God has determined that we need to be disciplined or judged for our previous behavior. And as I mentioned before, some people never get it. Some people actually die in the midst of judgment. That's not a real problem. It's not a negative thing. That's not the worst thing. Dying is not the worst thing that can happen to a Christian. But that's all I really wanted to do, was to show that passing under the rod was a time of judgment. It's a periodic time when God judges. Amen.